Hi, I'm Judy Tyabji. Thank you very much for joining us today. Today we're going into an area that we don't often get a chance to look at. It's under the heading of science and ethics. As you know, we debated evolution theory a little while ago, and we also had a very heated discussion about fetal rights and whether or not the government should intervene. We've also talked about research in general. Today we're looking at the subject of cloning, and we have two guests with us, I think, who will help us understand both what the issues are and perhaps where we should be drawing some borders around the issue of cloning. Many of you may not be aware that currently the federal government does not have a lot of laws, and although there are discussions about regulations, there's nothing yet in writing. But let's present first a background on recent breakthroughs and the legislative framework. Many of us heard stories of Dolly, the adult cloned sheep in Scotland. Scientists working on this project claim that the cloning of animals allows them to study diseases which are passed on genetically, so that they can begin working on cures for these diseases. It also may allow the development of procedures which help humans defy the aging process. Dolly was created by combining the DNA of a single cell from the udder of a 6-year-old ewe with an unfertilized egg stripped of its genetic code.
There are a number of genetic diseases for which there isn't a cure at the present time, serious diseases, and this will enable us to carry out research into the causes of those diseases and perhaps develop methods to treat them.
The question of where we draw the ethical line when it comes to human experiments is now being asked.
Perhaps Saddam Hussein would like to give birth to himself, to see his own twin brought up in his own home, not just once, but 100 times, 10,000 times.
More recently, in Bath, England, researchers announced that they had successfully cloned a headless frog.
We produce two different sorts of tadpoles. There's the sort that's the isolated head, and there's the type that's the isolated trunk and tail.
What this means is that they produced a frog's head with no body and a body without a head. Professor Jonathan Slack's research on tadpoles is aimed at unlocking the secrets of human growth, and he thinks this will help treat human illness.
If we find something like this works in frogs, we can be pretty sure it's going to work in fish, birds, and mammals as well. And therefore, I'm quite sure that the same basic mechanisms would exist in humans.
Researchers claim that continued research into cloning and genetics will allow them to grow replacement parts for humans, or to experiment on cures for certain diseases. In Canada, the Royal Commission on Reproductive Technology reported out several years ago. This commission spent 4 years and about $28 million investigating reproductive technologies and practices. This commission was chaired by Dr. Patricia Baird of UBC and made over 300 recommendations to the federal government.
They've looked at what happens south of the border. They've seen that there are billboards there saying womb for rent. They've seen that there's a sperm for sale of Nobel laureates. There's an industry in selling sperm of $164 million.
Although this committee reported out and the federal government was supposed to follow through, the federal government has not yet passed any of these laws. Meanwhile, in Calgary, the Foothills Hospital recently began stockpiling frozen embryos from its fertilization program, and it is proposing that these thousands of frozen embryos be offered to infertile couples for adoption. There are no laws governing any children's eventual right to know their parent of origin. So, an enormous field. Where do we draw the ethical lines, and what are the practical considerations? We want to hear from you. Do not be afraid of our two guests today, although one is the head of medical research at UBC, and they're known around the world for their genetic research. He, I'm sure, will be happy to answer your questions. And our other guest is a bishop of the Catholic Church, and he'll help us draw some ethical boundaries. Back after a quick break with your calls to this number.
Hi, sweetie. How's LA? Yeah, they do that there. Yeah, the place is looking fine. Pretty empty, though. Any chance you could hop on a plane? Be here for Christmas? Yeah. Yeah, I missed you, too. There's someone at the door. Merry Christmas, baby.
Some days are made to last forever. Beautiful from Estee Lauder. Now red for the holidays. A bright red toad in brilliant lip color. $22.50 with any Estee Lauder fragrance purchase. This holiday offer is now at Eaton's.
When should you plant geranium cuttings? What's the only time of year to safely move peonies? How long can live Christmas trees remain indoors? Get answers to these and other questions by ordering the Get Up and Grow Gardening Guide and Calendar for 1998. Gord Nickel, host of the Get Up and Grow TV show, has compiled over 360 useful tips to help novices and green thumbs alike succeed in the garden. All of this timely information has been combined with rich botanical illustrations to give you an invaluable resource.
Hi, I'm Gord Nickel, host of Get Up and Grow, seen every Saturday morning on Check TV. Order the Get Up and Grow Gardening Guide and Calendar now, and you'll receive a Forget-Me-Not seed package at no extra cost.
To order your gardening guide and calendar, send $12.99 plus $2 shipping and handling to the address on your screen, or call 1-888-456-5577 and have your credit card handy. The guide is also available at Canner Nursery in Victoria, Abbotsford, and Chilliwack. Call now and get growing in 1998.
And today we're talking about cloning. It's something that, I heard some jingle bells just now. I think that's supposed to be Christmas music. But cloning is something that people say we need to have an ethical debate about. What are the parameters that should be drawn, given that there are no laws governing this today? And we have with us two guests with us. One is Bishop Remy Giroux from the Catholic Church. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
I look forward to your comments on this. And Dr. Jan Friedman, you are the head of medical research in genetics at UBC.
Head of medical genetics.
Yeah, it was a long title. I'm never going to get it right. I'll probably introduce you three different ways. This is a huge subject, and I'm going to start out, after having done some reading on the background material, I have to ask you, when do you expect the first human clone, and what do you think the motivation will be?
Well, it's hard to know when to expect it because there are technological barriers, just of getting it to work. But the major ones have been solved, and it wouldn't surprise me to see it become possible to develop a human clone within anywhere from a year or two to 10 years. I think we'll see it in the reasonable future. As to why it might be done, most of the discussions I've heard suggest that it would be done as a treatment for infertility, sort of an extreme treatment in cases where there's no other way for a couple to have a child.
Okay, I want to bring you to this then, Bishop Giroux. What is the position of religious leaders or the religious community on the idea of cloning, and to what extent are you talking to the governments about it?
Well, first of all, I want to make it sure I don't plan to try and demonize science. I'm all in favor of science, and I think we all look for progress. But at this point, I think it's safe to say that the vast majority of religious leaders figure that if and when there's an attempt made to actually clone a human being, it'll be a sad day for humanity.
And so in that respect, is that being communicated anywhere? Because I haven't heard a lot about, I haven't heard the ethical debate yet on cloning.
Well, I think most of the major religious groups are trying to get their message heard.
Right.
I'm not sure they're getting all that good a cooperation from the media.
Okay, I bet we could have a long conversation about that. Dr. Friedman, I noticed that in the story we saw that actually it was out of Britain that these first initiatives on cloning came out, but within weeks of that announcement, the government withdrew funding and said it's up to industry now to fund the research. Well, if private sector is going to fund the research, then the patents will be held by the private sector and cloning will become an industry. How do you feel about that as an academic?
Well, it frightens me. I think that we've already seen that a lot of the movement toward going more toward newer and newer technologies has come through industry. One can view that as good or bad, but I think it's the case. It does concern me that profit, rather than concern about good or concern about what's right, may drive some of these issues.
Right.
Certainly, the influence of industry on the whole field of genetics has grown enormously over the last few years, and I think it's important that the academic sector remain independent and not subservient to industrial interests.
I think that's probably a debate in itself. We're going to take a couple of calls, and then we'll provide a little bit more of the background on some of the breakthroughs and the legislative framework. We're going to start by talking to Barbara in Victoria. Hi, Barbara.
Hello.
Hi, go ahead.
I'm realizing that I'm just a little bit off topic because I wasn't thinking of the ethical debate, but my experience with infants and early childhood development and my training in psychology has shown me that there's a really important aspect to cellular memory in a child's emotional and mental growth and development, and we get that from our grandparents and our great-grandparents. Now, if we're going to make little children out of little clones, where on earth do they get that heritage? And that's my concern.
Wow, I think that's a very important point to raise. I actually want to talk about that, the intangibles of what makes up a human being. It's not something that science generally deals with, but let's put that over to the church then. The intangibles, the things that go beyond what we can measure.
Precisely. I think you're right on target, and I think it's good that we're having this discussion on the eve of Christmas, as it were, because that's the day when we remember that great historic event of the birth of Jesus Christ. And that revealed to humankind an idea of the dignity of the human person that had never been known before. And that's why I'm happy to hear Dr. Friedman talk about his concern that this not become a question of profit, because then we'll have the ultimate, the commercialization of human beings as objects.
Right. That's very brave new world. I mean, you're nodding as well. I mean, I'd be interested to know how often science talks about intangibles like the spiritual side, or as she said, genetic memory that may not be measured.
Well, I think in genetics this is something we talk about a great deal because we're quite aware that ours is a science that has been abused in the past, that we have a responsibility.
That's an understatement for many people, I guess, eh?
I think we have a particular responsibility in this field to be careful and cautious and circumspect about how what we do is used.
Right.
But I agree with the caller that there's a great deal more to human beings than what's in their genes. And I think part of the concern are part of the promises that some people have made on both sides, both positive and negative, with respect to cloning are misplaced, because people have assumed that if you, say, cloned Adolf Hitler, you'd end up with another Adolf Hitler. I think that's probably not true. There's a great deal that's not in our genes. There's a great deal that is, but there's a great deal that's not, too.
Okay, we're going to give a little bit more background on that, and we'll go right back to the phones. And basically what you need to know is that there was a Royal Commission on Reproductive Technology, as we mentioned earlier, and when it reported out after 4 years of investigation, some of the recommendations to oversee scientific work in Canada included establishing a national board to regulate and license doctors and clinics practicing in techniques that create or alter human life. They wanted to have a ban placed on the sale of human eggs, sperm, embryos, fetuses, and fetal tissue. In addition, they wanted to impose a ban on surrogate mothers who would carry a baby to term for someone else. They also wanted to restrict practices to allow only women with blocked fallopian tubes to receive in vitro fertilization treatment. And there was a proposed controversial ban on prenatal testing to determine the sex of a child, which could not occur unless there was a medical need associated with this test. Now, although these recommendations were welcomed by some and criticized by others who said they did not do enough to restrict genetic experimentation, the federal government was slow to act on the recommendations. But they finally tabled Bill C-47 in the House of Commons to bring in laws which included a law on cloning. Bill C-47 would have made the cloning of humans illegal, but it died on the order papers when the federal election was called earlier this year. It is illegal to clone humans in Spain, Germany, Denmark, Australia, Argentina, and the UK, and France has promised to pass a law banning cloning. The United States and Canada have no laws on this, and in the US, cloning is being referred to by the National Bioethics Advisory Committee as delayed genetic twins. Something which I know some geneticists are actually even upset about because they think that's a bit misleading. We'll go back to the phones and continue the discussion. And we'll start with Sean in Surrey. Hi, Sean.
Hi.
Hi, go ahead.
I've heard for years now that we've already been doing some cloning on human beings, not a full person, but to some extent. Can you explain that?
Okay, I think that's a good question.
the word cloning is used for a number of different things. It means making an exact copy of something. So we routinely clone genes, for example. We make exact copies of those genes, and that's done with human genes, it's done with animal genes, it's done with plant genes. We also have cloned cells. We've taken blood cells, for example, or skin cells, or cells from tumors from humans, and cloned those, reproduce them. They don't make a person, they just make cells. So that's another kind of cloning. But the kind of cloning we're talking about today is the kind in which the genetic material from an adult or from a person who's already been born is put into an egg, and that egg becomes a full human being.
So and it's a clone from an adult.
From an adult, and it's a different kind of cloning.
Okay. Take another call, and then maybe we'll ask you the question on that. Marie in Duncan. Hi, Marie.
Hi.
Hi, go ahead.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Just wanted to say that I personally oppose to cloning, regardless it's good, bad, evil, or religion or whatever, because when you see the record of what human has done, interfering with all the world, the nature and everything, and if people have want children and can't have it, it's got plenty of to choose from all over the world, starving little children. We don't need to make 3 or 4 more of other misery anyway. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And actually, I think that's a very good point to make. In addition to that aspect, what about a question of priorities when you spend so much money on these kinds of things? To what extent do you see that being addressed?
I think what's just happening now is we're getting to the heart of this discussion. The question of trying to form another human person. And I was happy to hear Dr. Friedman recognize that science knows that just putting together the genetic material does not give you a person. And traditionally we know that the person actually is an enfleshed spirit. The most important part of the person in terms of priority is not the material part, but the spiritual with its eternal destiny. So I think that's where the heart of the issue lies, and I think that's where we really have to call on our legislators to accept responsibility for the common good.
And that will be interesting to see what kind of response we would get out of them if we do that. And as I've mentioned before the show, we know a number of legislative offices actually do monitor the show, and I guess what we'd like to hear from the callers as well is what kind of message would you send to your public policy makers today on this issue. And we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more of your calls.
Tyabji is brought to you in part by Metro Lexus Toyota, leaders in customer satisfaction.
How can you give someone a taste of something this refreshing, this cool, this holiday season? Give a Brita water filter system. It's a really cool gift.
Hey, don't switch that dial, cause this is gonna make you smile. See these warm, toasty sweaters for your family? At 30% off, put them under your tree. And comfy, cozy robes, all at 25% off now. And only at Eaton's, wow! 30% off men's dress shirts and ties. There's Christian Dior, Aero, Hathaway, and Distinction for all you guys. And there's me, Mr. Magical Moose. Only $9.93.
Call to order Rogers Me TV now and you could win a trip to historic England.
I'm so into history.
Or one of 10 Sony home theaters. There's over $300,000 in prizes, including a grand prize of $50,000. The earlier you enter, the more chances to win. And with 16 channels for as little as $5.99, you can't lose. Order Me TV today to win. Call 1-888-ROGERS-1.
Time magazine proclaims Helen Hunt's performance in As Good as It Gets is a revelation.
How old are you? By your eyes, I'd say you were 50.
If I went by your eyes, I'd say you were kind.
Astonishing.
I have to draw you.
Stop staring. Do a vase.
This film is full of laughs, surprises, gasps, and tears.
Try not to ruin everything by being you.
Maybe we could live without the wisecracks.
As Good as It Gets.
Maybe we could.
Opens everywhere December 25th.
The RE/MAX Home Tour is on the air. All week, the RE/MAX Mobile Production Studio tours Vancouver Island, videotaping a cross-section of the finest properties listed for sale. Watch the RE/MAX Home Tour Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. It's here on Check TV, Vancouver Island's home tour.
And today we're talking about cloning. Our guests are the Most Reverend Bishop Remy Deroux. He's a Roman Catholic bishop for Victoria. And Dr. Jan Friedman is actually the head of medical genetics at UBC, not the dean. That's my mistake. Gave out the wrong information to the graphics people. And we'll go straight back to the phones, talk a little bit more about this. Start with Allison in Victoria. And by the way, we do have some Victoria lines free if you can call in. Allison, go ahead.
Hi, I'd just like to comment on Dr. Friedman's comment about using cloning for fertility.
Right.
There's a lot of children and babies out there who are waiting to be adopted, and I think it's absolutely ridiculous that they would start cloning children where there's all this overpopulation and these children who already need families. And as for comments to the government, I think these people are playing God, and I think that's wrong.
Okay, well, thank you for that comment. That is something that you hear quite often when it comes to fertility, and UBC is involved in fertility clinics.
Yes.
Okay, so what do you say to people who say that to you?
Well, personally, I agree with the caller.
Okay.
I think that this is an extreme use of technology. But the fact is that many people seem to have a almost overwhelming desire to have not only to have children, but to have children that have their own genetic makeup or part of their own genetic makeup.
Right.
I think in part it relates to the same sort of misunderstanding that I alluded to earlier, that people are only what their genes are. And I think that we're much more than that, and parents, whether or not there's any biological relationship, have a profound effect on their children.
Just from the nurturing. And I mean, I have to throw it to you. She said playing God. So, I mean, that's sort of in your department.
The temptation to play God is as old as humankind.
Right.
In fact, in Christian circles, we call that original sin. The right to decide what's right or wrong.
Right.
But what concerns me is what lies behind this idea of parents wanting that type of child, almost as if the parents want precisely to play God, to create others in their own image, which means they consider the others not as persons with their own eternal destiny, their own dignity, but as objects to be used
for
their gratification. The parents who, for instance, want to make this child in their own image are really treating the child as an object. And that's why I am really concerned what this could do for science, because I'm worried about the kind of impression, the image that will be given of what science is all about. If science starts playing with monstrosities and starts precisely playing God, and particularly if that's put in the hands of private endeavors where it becomes commercialized for pure matters of profit.
It does. What bothers me is how imminent some of this is, actually. When the breakthrough happened in the UK, that it immediately passed over to industry. We're not that far away. Yeah, let's talk to Dan now in Burnaby. Hi, Dan.
Yes, hello?
Hi, go ahead.
Yes, I just want to comment on cloning about, I think it's already been done in, I don't know where, but because I used to subscribe to a newspaper,
right?
A small newspaper, and it's called Contact. It used to be called Liberator. And about the sheep dolly, they had the same story and similar pictures, and it's about 6 or 7 years ago, so it seems to be old news.
Okay. Well, I think you've raised an important point. There actually is a type of cloning that's been around in the agricultural circles for many years. It's a little different, though, isn't it? Yeah.
There are techniques by which fertilized eggs, small embryos, have been split into several pieces, or more than one piece at least, and each of the pieces go on to make a full animal. And so that kind of cloning has been around. What was different here was that in those cases, you still have uncertainty about what the genetic composition of each of the animals is.
It may not be identical because they've been split in half or something.
Well, no, they're actually identical, but they're a product of their mother and their father.
Oh, I see. You haven't controlled what's
right.
gone into it.
Whereas in this case, you've taken a cell that's from an adult, so you can see what that adult is like.
Oh, I see.
And that's put into an egg. Okay. So it's, again, a different process, but the caller is correct that it's not that this was suddenly learned instantly. It's an accumulation of information and knowledge that's been gained in a variety of areas. And one of the intentions in doing these studies has nothing to do with even producing animals, but only in understanding the basic processes that are involved.
Genetics. Okay.
And this, I think, is the point where ethics wants to draw a line. We have to make a clear distinction between animals or objects out in nature, whatever type of plants, vegetables, whatever, and the human being. The human being is sacred, or else democracy is going to disappear. Because if we don't respect that inviolable dignity of the human being and the right not to have discrimination against any human being, then there's no foundation left to democracy.
Okay, well that's an interesting point too about drawing that line, because science is not there to draw the line for us. We're supposed to be putting those guidelines in. We want to show you some of the uses or potential uses for cloning that have come out of the research papers at the genetics lab. So let's talk about that for a second. Uses for cloning include multiple copies of a valuable livestock animal, which could be made with less valuable animals carrying the pregnancy. Try that for a human parallel. Animals could be cloned which can carry medicines in their milk or meat, such as insulin in cow milk. Cloning could be used to make animals with organs carrying human tissue and antigens, which could be used for organ transplant in humans. The cloning of animals can be used to study aging and genetically transferred disease. Endangered species could have some cells put aside so that even if their populations diminish in the wild, they can be reproduced in the lab. So much for environmental responsibility. Couples who cannot produce a child naturally could have the option of allowing the woman to carry the DNA of her husband in her egg, basically cloning her husband. A beloved child could be cloned if they die early, or a family member could be cloned if they die in an accident. And a lesbian couple could reproduce without a man if one carried the DNA of the other in her egg. And that came out of Dr. Baird's paper at UBC, some of the ideas.
Yeah, so push that a step further. Now what happens to the women? Women being used as objects for commercial purposes.
I suppose that some would say that that happens with surrogate motherhood as well. That was one of the problems that brought up. So, yeah, that has all kinds of implications like that.
Yeah. I think that this also raises, again, part of the expectations that are inappropriate. I mean, the idea, for example, of replacing a beloved child who was lost in an accident or something, if you were able to clone that child, you wouldn't have that child.
Right.
You'd have
It'd
a different
be a different
child.
person inside the same body.
Well, not even the same body.
Not even.
But with the same genetic makeup,
Okay,
perhaps.
well, it would look like
and
the
I think it would be a different person. And so there's really a misunderstanding as to what cloning can do and what it can't do.
Okay, and if you are concerned that there should be some sort of regulatory framework, and we'll try to talk a little bit about what that might be after the break, then you can actually write to Alan Rock. Now, he's the federal minister responsible for health at the House of Commons in Ottawa, Ontario, K1A0A6. They have the information from the Royal Commission on Reproductive Technology, so certainly the ability to put that framework together should be fairly simple. And we'll be back after a quick break with more of your calls, and we're talking about cloning.
This holiday from Eden's, discover the romantic fragrance L'air du Temps and receive absolutely free this 3-piece gift set.
Call to order Rogers Me TV now and you could win a trip to historic England
I'm so into history.
or one of 10 Sony home theaters. There's over $300,000 in prizes, including a grand prize of $50,000. The earlier you enter, the more chances to win. And with 16 channels for as little as $5.99, you can't lose. Order Me TV today to win. Call 1-888-ROGERS-1.
Everyone has their favorite side of a Kellogg's Mini Wheat. 100% whole wheat side with a sweet frosted side. Kellogg's Mini Wheat.
Which side are you on?
New Kellogg's Honey Rice Krispie Cereal.
How can you give someone a taste of something this refreshing, this cool, this holiday season? Give a Brita water filter system. It's a really cool gift.
Our question of the day today, to what extent would you support the cloning of humans? And here are some comments from people on the street.
I'm very wary of it. I guess I'm a Christian. I believe in God making everybody, and it worries me a lot when man takes his own hands and starts creating. And then you get to the point where are people are clones? Are there clones? Do they have souls? Are they real? Are they alive, or are they just meat for somebody else to use and parts and things? So I'm very much against cloning.
I'm kind of actually against it, but everything should be natural.
I'd have to see it to believe it. If it happens, it happens. Like I said, if they do it, it's just for recognition. They're not doing it to serve any real purpose. Waste of money. I can think of better things to spend money on cloning people.
Cloned, yeah. Just before we go back to the lines, two things you should know about is that yesterday there was actually a CTV national Angus Reid poll, so right across the country, on what Canadians thought about cloning humans. Now, it came out with 72% say that cloning humans for body parts is unacceptable, because that was one of the implications of the headless frog, is that you could clone spare body parts. And this actually was a large sample, so it was accurate within plus or minus 2.5%. Now, on the other side of the border, in the United States, there was an interesting article which came out last week, which said human cloning was first reviled but now gains favor. And in there it says that scientists who originally were opposed to the idea of human cloning have now become hopeful about this notion. A handful of fertility centers are conducting experiments with human eggs right now, and the federal government is now supporting new research on the cloning of monkeys in order to be able to transfer that, and that one of the things they could do with cloning is actually adding genes to give desired traits. Now that's really getting into genetic manipulation. And Dr. Steen Wollaston, a cloning pioneer who dealt with animals, said, from my perspective, it's just a matter of time. So, interesting. I'll take some calls and then I'll let you guys respond to that. But we'll get Keith from Mission on the phone now. Hi, Keith.
Hi, how's it going?
Fine, thanks. Go ahead.
Well, I tell you got an interesting topic, believe you me.
Yeah.
Cloning on deadly against, there's no two ways about it. They're playing God. They're looking for the perfect child,
right? The
perfect person, which, as far as I'm concerned, that's totally against it. Dr. Freeman, you can't do that. Forget it. You don't look for the perfect person. You guys are just out there to get money, and that's it.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I'll let Dr. Friedman respond to that, and maybe also to the idea of genetic manipulation.
Well, I, again, agree with the caller. I don't think there's such a thing as a perfect person, and I don't think that that's a legitimate end for cloning at all.
So you'd support some sort of regulation to prevent that kind of thing, or?
I think we do need to have a regulatory framework and a licensing framework for these technologies. There is a potential for abuse, for sure.
Well, yeah, I think so, especially by millionaires. You get the next one.
I have some reservations about that caller's comment that you guys are just out there to make money.
Okay.
I don't think that's fair to scientists.
Okay.
The scientists I know are people of integrity, and they're very concerned about what's happening.
Okay, and I think in Canada especially, it's important that there be public funds available so they don't have to turn to the corporate sector. But that's a good point. Let's talk to Pam in Chemainus now. Hi, Pam.
Hi.
Hi, go ahead.
I'm mixed emotions about the cloning. However, I'm someone, my husband and I can't have children naturally.
Okay.
And if I could afford IVF, I would do something like that. We've discussed it.
Right.
We have, 3 beautiful adopted girls.
Right.
And it just infuriates me when people say there's kids out there to be adopted, understandably so, and we've done that. But still, it's human nature to wonder what your own children would look like.
Okay, I think that's thank you for sharing your perspective with us. And that's important to know too. But she made an interesting comment, further to your comment about money, that if they could afford in vitro fertilization, they would. Now, in that case, we have some reproductive technology. Again, the wealthy may have access. People are worried that with cloning, it would be basically millionaires' spare parts, and the rest of us would be shut out.
No, that's right on target, because who gets to clone whom, and who decides who's going to get cloned and for whose benefit?
Right.
And if that's left in the hands of private enterprise for profit, then we're not far away from trying to form a master race for money.
And that's
really scary.
Yeah.
If that's going to be allowed to happen. And that's where I think the legislators really have to face the responsibility. They can't just let this slip by, or they're going to be terribly irresponsible, and future generations will certainly make that clear, not only pay the price, but also make that clear that they've been betrayed by our legislators.
Okay, I think it's a very strong statement. There's 2 calls in a row that we want to take who are actually, as I understand it, on opposite sides. So let's first talk to Lorna from Lake Cowichan. Hi, Lorna.
Hello, how are you?
Fine, thanks.
I totally disagree with cloning of human beings. I'm Catholic, and and regardless of what religion I am, I attend St. Louis de Montfort Church. Hello, Bishop DeRue. And using animals, well, partly I agree with that if a person needs a new liver or a new heart, but I don't believe in using cloning to do it.
Okay, well...
I think there's too many children out there that need good homes. There's lots of children that need to be adopted.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. I'm now going to take Bill from Victoria. I understand he has another point of view. Hi, Bill.
Well, I'd just like to mention that in a way, I don't want to touch this, upset too many people, but Jesus was cloned in a way. He only received 1 genetic copy, but that's not a big deal. I'm not really too concerned with it.
You might be.
What want to tell all those people who disagree with it, I disagree with it myself. But if you have a child which was born with deformity, or somebody who had their leg cut off by some form, and they have the possibility of reproducing a leg which could be maybe surgically put on, I'm sure if you were put in that situation, you would jump on that opportunity.
Right.
But suddenly people are disagreeing with it. So there should be limits, but...
Okay, I think that you've raised the issue of the practical application, which we wanted to talk about. I also know that Bishop Drew is going to have to address the idea of Jesus being cloned.
Well, to say that Jesus was cloned even in a certain way is to make a gratuitous affirmation for which there's no proof. And the burden of proof would be on the person who makes that claim.
Okay. Well, I don't think the majority of people aren't saying that, so we'd have to, we're running short of time in this segment, but I wanted to hear what Dr. Friedman had to say about the practical applications for those who may say cloning is really scary, but could you grow my child an extra leg?
I think that we should recognize a difference again between cloning a whole person and producing artificially by scientific means a part of a person. So I would not see the same problems inherent in producing a liver in a test tube or a liver in a cow that could be transplanted into a human person who needed a liver as I would in putting together a person. I think it's a different issue.
I think it's a very weird conversation to even have, but to think that there's an ability for science to do that, I have to put this to both of you, although I know the director's going to get mad because we have to go to a break, but hepatitis C, there are all these people who are infected by tainted blood. If we had the opportunity to grow them new livers through cloning. Who are we to say no?
That's assuming, of course, that we're going to solve diseases by cloning. What about looking the other side of the middle? Because in agriculture, we know that monoculture is the best way to bring in disease. So who says that cloning wouldn't bring in vulnerability to disease?
Well, and that's actually, I think that some of the researchers had said that. Very clever of you, Bishop Giroux.
It's possible that it could, but I think in direct answer to your question, I would see that as an appropriate use of this technology. I would not consider it cloning a human being.
Okay, and we're over time for a break. We'll be right back with more of your calls, and we're talking about cloning.
Celebrate the season with a Dairy Queen frozen cake. It's the perfect dessert for a perfect time of year. So cool and so good. So make your next holiday gathering festive with a Dairy Queen frozen cake. They're decorated with cheer and they're DQ through and through.
Some days are made to last forever. Beautiful from Estee Lauder. Now red for the holidays. A bright red toad in brilliant lip color. $22.50 with any Estee Lauder fragrance purchase. This holiday offer is now at Eaton's.
Now get Touched by Love, a new 36-song collection of the most popular soft rock hits.
I love you. I honestly love you.
Sometimes when we touch, you'll feel the magic of love in every song. Touched by Love is not sold in stores, so order now. Call toll-free now for Touched by Love. 2 cassettes $19.98, 2 CDs $26.98, plus $4.95 shipping. Call now.
And we're talking about cloning, and just before we go back to the phones, we'll show you the question of the day today. To what extent would you support the cloning of humans? And here are some more comments from people on the street.
I think it would probably end up causing problems eventually, like something would come up. Just, I don't know, create a monster, Just something would come up. You don't know what, but yeah, always something does.
Well, if there could be limits put on it, that would be fine, but it's, I sort of think it's a scary topic. I don't think it's a good idea. I think a lot of danger can come from it. Yeah.
It's scary to me, too, because it just seems like any time, always the worst seems to come of whatever, the new things we invent. So
no matter what, somebody
evil out there do something crazy.
Does something bad.
I think the unfortunate thing is it'll probably be used for warfare like everything else. So cloning soldiers.
Because that's certainly something that's been raised. Oh, and so we'll go back to the phones now, and we'll start with Alan in Vancouver. Hi, Alan. Hi, go ahead.
Well, I'm basically a little tired of the genetic cowards that are out there. So I'm always hearing about the fears and the superstitions and that something bad's going to happen. And same thing happened with the atom when we, invented the atomic bomb. But look at all the benefits that came out of that. On the other hand, I think more positive things came out of it in the end. When you look back at history, the Romans were not allowed to dissect dead bodies, and that totally held up their medical advances. Here we are sitting here with a great opportunity for the future.
Okay.
We get religion and ethics, unfortunately, confusing the factors, and as far as I'm concerned, they should be filed under the category of superstition.
Okay.
These are the same people who told us the Earth was the center of the universe at one point.
Well, we can't carry too much baggage on these things.
Okay. and well, bottom line, I guess, to ignore cloning in medicine and agriculture is really to ignore some of the basic problems that we are facing in the very near future. And so I'm Actually, I have more faith in humankind that we will use it for good purposes. I know we'll use it for bad, but I do know that in the end, we'll probably come out far, far ahead.
Okay, well, you've raised a number of very provocative comments. I think both of you have to have a chance. I guess, first of all, I'll start with Dr. Friedman. Are we burying our head in the sand if we oppose it?
Well, I think we can't bury our head in the sand. And I think that we have to, as the caller says, we have to face these issues head on. The fundamental thing is these are very powerful technologies, and they can be abused. The technologies themselves, I don't think, is what's good or bad. It's the abuse that people can put them to, or the good uses that people can put them to. And if they're used well, then they're wonderful. If they're abused, they're horrible.
Okay, Bishop.
I basically disagree with the underlying assumption that you can do evil to bring about good. That's been done too often in the course of history, and we don't need to
fall
back into those traps again.
The end justifies the means, sort of thing, or?
Absolutely. And also, I don't think we would permit parents to experiment on their children, or to let the children be subject to poison or accidents simply because they're going to learn from them.
Oh, I see.
I think we have to be responsible. I think it's a fundamental principle that we need legislators and we need responsible people in the field of science as well to protect the weaker members of society, or else we destroy democracy.
Okay. Let's now talk to Joyce in Victoria. Hi, Joyce.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
I hope I don't offend anybody, but I figure it's taken 100 million years for us to reach the point we're at now.
Right.
I also think that sterility, spontaneous abortion, and homosexuality are nature's birth control.
Okay.
I believe you can't mess with Mother Nature, and I must say the Bishop is absolutely right about monoculture.
Okay, well, boy, that you must have hit every big button there is out there in terms of controversy. Comments on that?
Well, let's stay with that question of Mother Nature. Nature is not the basis of morality. Nature simply is. So we have every right to explore nature, provided that we do it for a good purpose and do not do anything evil in the process of doing that. But morality is based rather on our intent, and it's based on truth, on justice, on compassion, on love. It's not based on statistics.
Okay. And Dr. Friedman, in terms of what you're doing, to what extent how do you guide yourself in your work?
We have these discussions, and particularly with our students, we try to bring the consequences, the implications, what all of these things mean in context to their understanding, because these are, if driving a car is a responsibility with a powerful instrument, this is a much greater responsibility with a much more powerful instrument.
And of course, the consequences are on the human lives.
They're huge.
Yeah, for the rest of their lives.
Huge.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more of your calls on cloning.
Behold, Sensei in his natural habitat. Oh, what's going on here? Tour growth. Earning a little extra cash is good for the holiday budget. Shopping at Canadian Tire is even better for the holiday budget.
After all, it is Canada's houseware store. With thousands of brand name items, Canadian Tire always has just what you need. And at the guaranteed lowest prices, too.
You ever get the Flin Flon? Well, pretty much once a year. Smile.
Canadian Tire lets you give like Santa.
And save like Scrooge.
Climb in and get cozy? I can get into that. And I'm not about to let a big, bulky pad get in the way. So I started using new Always Ultra Thin overnights. When I lie down, they cover where my regular pad misses. They're longer front to back with wings that cover side to side, so I get better protection where I need it. And they're this thin. This is an idea I'm very comfortable with. New Always Ultra Thin overnights. Better overnight protection.
No two women are the same.
Two very different hairsprays for two very different holds.
This Pantene spray has elastase for a revolutionary flexible hold. A natural look and feel without all that stickiness. This one's ultra firm for demanding styles. A strong all-day hold. Both have provitamins that penetrate your hair. Both give you healthy looking hold and shine. Pantene elastase flexible hold or ultra firm for strong hold. For hair so healthy looking it shines. And now ultra firm has improved superior hold. It's Pantene's strongest hold ever.
Did everybody forget how to set hair? Well, steam in some style with Conair's Curl Care. Gentle, velvety rollers, moisturizing mists take you from no style to soft, sexy, lasting style. Nobody sets style like Conair.
Jumbo Metrics by Conair, the ultimate styling tool for every new fashion trend in hair. With enough attachments to crimp, straighten, and curl, including a brush for softer effect or a smoother look. It's a mini salon in one.
And coming up tomorrow, we'll be looking at street violence. And next week, the forest industry and recall. And Mike Smith will be on next week, as I will be one of the viewers up in Powell River. And now, just before we go back to the phones, one of the callers who couldn't stay this long, but she asked the question, would the church recognize a cloned person as someone with a soul?
Any human person has a soul, which is really why you, strictly speaking, can't clone. You cannot, by human means, no matter how powerful, produce what we call a spirit. Okay. That is a gift from eternity, right. And it's not something subject to manipulation by machinery.
Okay, well that's probably the answer that people would want to hear from the church. We'll go back to the lines and we'll talk to Barry in Vancouver. Hi, Barry.
Hi, Judy, how are you?
Fine, thanks. Go ahead.
People shouldn't be afraid of cloning. There could be tremendous benefits, cloning parts, new hearts for people, new limbs. Mm-hmm. There could be medical benefits that are beyond our wildest imagination. And the church has never really been a forward-thinking individual. Okay, I mean, the institution, the church, just doesn't think forward, so I don't consider what he has to say as being a whole lot. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I actually want Dr. Friedman to respond to this on the medical benefits aspect. It almost seems like there's two different categories. There's the medical benefits, and then there's the reproduction aspect of cloning.
Right, and I think that those involve two different techniques. The reproduction has argued that there may be, the people who are concerned about reproducing who are unable to otherwise, have argued that they need this to clone humans in order to be able to reproduce. Mm-hmm. The issue of making hearts, for example, in the test tube or in a sheep, I think is a completely different issue. It doesn't require making another human being. And in fact, making another human being to take his or her heart, I think, would be ethically abhorrent to just about anyone.
Okay. You want to answer that too?
Well, just to make that bland statement, the church has never been progressive, is to ignore history and to forget that all the great universities started as universities, as church schools. Mm-hmm. So I don't think we get anywhere by throwing out that kind of allegations.
Okay. And we'll go back to the phones. We'll now talk to Francis in Powell River. Hi, Francis.
Hi. Yeah, I'd just like to say I have no problems with the science of cloning. I have a problem with the motivations of the scientific community in developing it.
Okay.
And I believe that no scientist has ever created anything original. All they are is master manipulators of what was brought into being at creation. Like, I believe that life began with creation, not conception.
Okay.
And I also believe that all human beings have an absolute right to the full and complete knowledge of the genetic material that causes them to come into being. And I think that if they automatically were given that full and complete knowledge, I think most of these moral and ethical things would come to a grinding halt.
Okay, I think you've raised a point that is very important. At the end of the story that started the show, there's that hospital in Calgary saying frozen embryos for adoption. To what extent do the children who are produced by this method have a right to know their origins, if those origins are in science?
Well, this is the ultimate problem that lies behind cloning, is what it will do in terms of distorting human relationships. I mean, who would want to be the sister of their mother or the son or daughter of a grandparent? And what that does in terms of destroying the normal human relationships that mean so much to human life. Right. Those are frightening implications.
And Dr. Friedman, your comments on that?
I would agree too. To the extent that cloning might distort those, that would be very frightening. This issue really isn't one of cloning. It's an issue that relates to adoption. It's an issue that relates to in vitro fertilization, and it's not a scientific issue. It's an issue that is one of what we believe as a society is right, and that's something that's changed over the course of the last several years.
Okay, the lines are jammed. I'll try to get in. One more call. Glennis from Victoria. Hi, Glennis.
Hi. I was going to say, first of all, I don't mind the thought of cloning if cancerous tissue was to be cloned, and then research could be done on the tissue as opposed to on animals or something like that. Right. But in terms of cloning human beings, I look back over history as well, and I look at the ethnic cleansing that went on, and Hitler's philosophy around blue-eyed, blonde-haired children.
Right.
And I also look at ethnic cleansing as still existing today. We haven't learned from the mistakes of the horrific situation back in Hitler's day, and we're still learning. We're overfishing, we're overlogging. Right. We are still just human beings, and if we give the right to humans, as frail and as academic, both ends of the spectrum, as they are, then we're only saying, hey, we're making decisions based on our own capabilities, and how capable are we? Okay. At the end of the day, we keep coming back and refixing mistakes we've made, and do we really want to get ourselves into another bigger mistake?
Okay, well, a very articulate last call to go on, and we're almost out of time, so comments on that's what you've referred to earlier, too.
Yes, I would just comment that the caller is absolutely right. We have no idea, just from a technical point of view, what problems we might be creating in attempting to fix something.
Okay, and Bishop Bermudier.
Well, I think all this points to the need for a dialogue between the various sciences, so that scientists don't play God and religious people don't pontificate, and we all draw from the deeper wells of the wisdom of the human race and look for the common good and make sure that our legislators act accordingly.
That's a great way to end. We're out of time. Thank you both, and we'll be right back.
I know, Santa. I like the velvet suit, too. But switch to polyester and we'll save a bundle.
That's great, Scrooge. But I already save a lot at Canadian Tire, where Tyco's Radio Control Turbo Tantrum is available for only $74.99. Not to mention Newborn Diaper Surprise from Hasbro. It's quite a deal for just $26.99.
I don't know. What do you guys think?
No. Canadian Tire lets you give like Santa.
And save like Scrooge. It's Tony's birthday! Happy birthday to you! Happy birthday, Tony! Happy birthday to you! Best wishes, my friend. Happy birthday, dear Tony! We love you, man! Happy birthday to you!
Now you can celebrate with the Tony the Tiger plush toy. To get yours, see details on these birthday edition boxes.
Tony, we think you're great!
It's Christmas time at Woodgrove Center.
Santa is in the building 7 days a week from now till Christmas. Get photos with Santa, get your gifts wrapped, and take advantage of Woodgrove's extended holiday hours. There's more sounds of Christmas at Woodgrove Center.
We'll share the joys of the season. It's Christmas time and more at Woodgrove Center.
Unexpected treasures await you at the Gallery Shop in the Art Gallery of Greater Victoria. See unique items from around the province and around the world. The Gallery Shop offers an extraordinary shopping experience away from the hustle and bustle, where parking is free and plentiful. With prices starting from $2, you'll find everything from stocking stuffers and home decorations to major gifts. Life is about giving. The Gallery Shop at the Art Gallery of Greater Victoria just makes it affordable.
Recent events, particularly in Victoria, are making many people concerned that they can no longer walk down the street safely. Tomorrow we'll talk about street violence, the realities and the appearances. Today we introduced the subject of cloning. I'm sure we'll have to come back to subjects like this, whether it's reproductive technology or cloning. I thought you should know that on the internet you can find a site called Americans for Cloning Elvis, and there's a big petition, and that to me represents the other extreme, which we didn't really talk about. We'll return to the subject. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow.